morning.
I'm so humbled and grateful to be here with you this morning. I always feel really loved and at home when I come here, so I'm really grateful to all of you for that. And I'm so happy that my family could come with me today and see all of you and get lots of smiles and hugs and see friends again. This morning our scripture is from Luke chapter 17, verse 11 through 19. And so I'm going to go ahead and read that from the NRSV. And if you have your scriptures, you can follow along with me. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He fell at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." I was really excited when I saw what today's theme was. I thought that'll be a really great time of reflection and meditation and journaling for myself. I live a pretty fast-paced life, and so I enjoyed sitting and journaling and reading and contemplating what God was asking me to share with you this morning. And this passage is rather familiar to some of us here this morning, and while hopefully none of us can relate to having leprosy or something that would separate you so much, this morning I'm going to ask you to be open in relating to various characters' points of view within our passage. So first, let's just kind of lay out the background and the facts. So these lepers, these who were afflicted with leprosy, were outcasts. They were untouchable because it made them unclean according to the Jewish law in that day. So what I got to thinking was, who knows how long these men and women had been living away from family and friends, away from socializing. They were in a community of people who were hurting. And as far as I'm concerned, any length of time would feel terribly long and isolating. And I can't imagine being separated from my family. So I ask yourself now to kind of put yourself in this position and imagine that you have been outcast and removed from those people you love, activities you enjoy. You've missed birthdays, perhaps anniversaries, a job that you really enjoy, holidays, the list could go on. And I started thinking of this as I prepared because I thought, what do these people have in our story? What is their top priority? What are they longing for every day as they live with this affliction? And what is it that they're rushing back for that they don't even have the inkling to stop and remember to go back and say, "Thank you. You've changed my life. You've given me my life back." After seeing the priest, what are they running to? Then I started thinking of those times when I've been one of the 9. So caught up. Where I need to be going where I'm supposed to be going, where I'm doing what my top priority is. Those things that are so important, and I'm so excited to get to, that I forget to turn to God for a moment of reflection or thanksgiving. So throughout my life, God's been consistently 1 step or 5 steps or 10 steps ahead of me. And I've never really been a big fan of the unknown, or a fan of when things take a hard left turn from the direction that I think they should be going. And I think I'm probably not alone in that feeling. We all kind of like to know what's happening, what's coming my way. Is everything going to be okay? But I found as I've entered into adulthood and the career field and starting a family, that a lot of the times we are trucking through, doing what we need to do to make sure our family is safe and healthy and that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And sometimes that can get really overwhelming. What I find particularly challenging in those times is remembering that God has been working with me throughout my entire life, showing me that his time is the time. And that just because things aren't going the way I imagined them going, it doesn't mean that God isn't doing some amazing behind-the-scenes work. And I found that that has consistently been my testimony throughout my life. That I found myself worried or concerned or questioning, and then in the end, it's all okay. But I can't forget to turn back to God in those times and thank him for the journey, the struggle, or no struggle, that's bringing me to a moment of clarity and blessing. So that's what I kept going back to. When I saw the theme, Give Thanks, we can remember to thank God, say that we remember to thank God for those times when things happen the way we would like them to happen, and we receive those good things. But I found that in my testimony, in my life, that I find myself thanking God for those times when I've been in the thick of it. And that's given God a chance to pick me up and say, see, remember? I do this every time. And it brings me right back. Through almost every major milestone in my life, finding and meeting my husband, finding a job, starting a family, just to mention a few. I found myself struggling and questioning why XYZ won't happen the right way, my right way. Why I'm not here when I want to be there. And each and every time God has me here, building the road to get me there. And I've experienced it more times than I can count. And I should be thanking and praising God in those moments. In everything, give thanks. This is where our priorities should be. Before we run off to take care of what we need to do, we need to stop and consider who is the one who's made it possible for this moment of joy, for this moment of clarity and freedom to happen. I once had a conversation with someone that said every morning when they woke up, they would wake up, go start to get ready for their day, and they would absolutely put themselves on the floor, on their knees, thanking God for their day that he had prepared for them. And every day without fail, they said, sometimes I oversleep, and I still take that time for 2 minutes to just get on the floor and just let myself be with God to start my day and to thank him for whatever he's sending my way, because I know that it's preparing me for what's coming. We tend to accept God's gift, but perhaps we take it for granted. Luke's not necessarily calling attention to the one leper over the others, but rather showing us how faithful disciples respond to God's grace and generosity with thanks and praise. I want to take a moment to talk about that one person, though. I found it really interesting that Luke took a moment to make a special point to make us aware that this person is a Samaritan or a foreigner. One who, according to this society, had another layer to his label of outcast. He wasn't just a leper. He was a Samaritan who had leprosy. But in this passage, in this story, it didn't matter where this person was from. Jesus credits the healing of this thankful Samaritan to their faith. They lived according to the principles that caused them to return to Jesus and express thanks. And that is an amazing example of living faith. So I began trying to consider how this point in the story parallels what labels and ideas that we put in place in our society. Perhaps without even realizing it much of the time, we tend to categorize people. Jesus is so good at reminding us that labels are just that. They're just labels. And in the scriptures, we're shown over and over how goodness and lessons that we can learn are taught through examples that came from everyone. Being open to the possibility of ministry through the least is a life changer. Whether you subconsciously put people in boxes labeled with society's expectations, or whether you yourself wear a label for whatever reason, let them fall away. Allow yourself to believe and expect goodness to come from everyone you meet. I remember when I was first teaching 3rd grade, it was several years ago, and I had a young man who came from a place, had to go home to a place every day that I would never want to be. I would never want anyone to be. And there were mornings that he would bring that to school. Some mornings his mom would bring him in if they had had an especially difficult morning. And she would pull me aside and she would explain what had happened. And my heart broke for him. And it broke for her. They were trapped in a place that they needed to leave, and they couldn't. So this young man would come in upset, but the moment he walked through my classroom door, it was like all of that faded away. He would come in and sit down. He was one of my most well-behaved and respectful students I had in my class that year. All the students loved him. I don't know if he had conversations with his friends about what his home was like, but as far as I could tell, no one could ever know from the way he treated others, from the way he treated his teachers, from the way he acted to his love of learning. And in fact, if some of you have heard this before, I apologize, but this young man is on my heart a lot. And now when I see him out in the community, no joke, he's a big guy. And he still comes up and gives me a big side hug and tells me he's glad to see me, and he's still that sweet young man. But I always expressed to my students how we needed to keep our room neat and tidy, and to make sure our desks were clean, and that I didn't like doodles on the corner of the desk. They would sit there and kind of doodle throughout class, and we'd talk about how, we need to get our wipes out, clean our desk before the end of the day, great job today. I was gone one day, and I had a substitute teacher take my class, and when I returned the next day, I kind of was walking around the room, taking note of how everything was going, and this young man had written on his desk. And at first I saw it, and I thought, what's he doing, writing on his desk? And in the corner of his desk, it gives me chills today, he wrote, "I love God." And he just left it there for people to see. And so I think of him often, and the fact that no matter where we come from, no matter what is trying to come at us day to day, we can still minister to anyone. And I don't know if he'll ever realize how much he ministered to me and still ministers to me every time I see him and every time I remember what kind of a young man he was in my class. This week I read something really interesting about gratitude. I always knew that it was polite and kind to express gratitude and thanks to people. But studies that focused on grateful people reveal that the permanent trait of gratitude actually helps make that person a healthier person and a happier person all around. The studies showed that stress was reduced, that even their immune system was strengthened. Saying thank you blesses both the person saying it as well as the one receiving the gratitude. That is amazing. Recognizing that positivity, recognizing those gifts that you receive from others, whether it's a smile, whether it's a handshake, whether it's thank you for inviting me this morning. That raises your spirits and enlivens us. When we practice the true gratitude of faithful disciples, it starts to come naturally from within us, rather than a response that we're told to do. We're teaching Naomi to say thank you, and it's okay. We're teaching her to say thank you. So right now, she doesn't really know what that means. When we hand her something, we ask her to say thank you, and she does her best. But as we grow and as we develop into disciples who are faithful to what God calls us to be, he calls us to be grateful, to give thanks, to embody that and be positive and radiate that light and that love and that acceptance of those gifts that we receive every day. It becomes a daily way of being as we respond to God's healing grace and love. So my prayer for you this morning is that God places on your heart the awareness of his love for you, of his awareness that no matter where we are in our life, God is leaps and bounds ahead, preparing the way and loving us through our life, because we are precious and you are worthy and you are incredible, and I'm so grateful for you.